Welcome to An Athletic Life, the show for former college athletes who want to look, feel, and live like an athlete again in real life. I'm Justin Andrade, founder of the Athlete Reboot system, and each week we break down simple, sustainable plays for training, nutrition, and mindset that actually fit careers, families, and real-world responsibilities. No hype workouts, no crash diets, just proven systems and real stories to help you rebuild a body and life you can be proud of again. Let's get into it. Hey guys, before I dive into this episode, I just want to take a second to say that this podcast particularly has taken me about 3 years since I finished coaching college athletics to be comfortable speaking fully about my experience, both as time as an assistant coach, as an associate coach, as a head coach, and really the impact it had on me personally and my perspective on athletics as a whole, and also why I feel so pulled towards helping college athletes and ex-college athletes transition away from that world. So if you appreciate or enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone that's either a former college athlete or maybe they're still coaching, just so they can feel that, they have someone that understands the perspective that they've gone through. And I hope that other people actually are able to take this perspective and really kind of just be able to digest it and understand, like, okay, there's so much more to the world outside of college athletics. Thanks. I spent most of my adult life believing that the world of athletics was actually the real world, and that if you could make it in that space, if you could handle the pressure, if you could handle the stress, if you could handle the hours, you could handle the expectation, then you were just meant to be kind of in the upper tier of society as a whole. And if you are someone that watches sports on TV, you know how glamorized that world can look, and especially if it's something that you grew up like I grew up as a kid going and watching Ohio State football games and going to Ohio State basketball games and seeing this world of, like, wow, like these athletes are amazing, and the coaches are up on a pedestal. And what I didn't realize was how insulated that world truly is, and how normal it makes things feel that were never meant to be acceptable, both in that environment and other parts of the world when you're not necessarily in athletics anymore. I was 23 years old, working essentially nonstop, responsible for an entire program, expected to have answers I couldn't possibly have because I never had those life experiences. And when I actually did the math and broke down what I was actually making financially, I was making less than minimum wage. And the craziest part about it is I would tell people I'm so grateful to actually be able to be in that world. And for the people that don't get into that world or try to get into college coaching and can't get in, like, they're trying to get in. They're like, oh, if I can just get if I can get the first job, if I can get a graduate assistant job, or if I can get an internship, then like that's when I'll make it and I'll be really excited. Or people that will redirect their careers when they're in their 30s thinking like, well, I'll just put in my dues in college athletics and then I'll make it to that like upper tier. And they see people that churn out of college athletics and they're like, well, like I could do it. I could do it. What they don't recognize is, like, I'm not sure that unless you are in football, and we'll talk about that later in this podcast, but like unless you're in one of the bigger sports where like you are actually compensated for the time that you put in, I'm not sure even with the compensation that it's worth it. And there's people that do it well, they're like present with their families. But even if you look at what the Seattle Seahawks head coach who's going to the Super Bowl just said, he said he spends 30 minutes on Thursdays with his son. He's a year old. And like that's someone who's making millions of dollars. He's at the pinnacle of the sport. He's doing something that people will work their entire lives for. And he's saying his 1 year old, like, he's not able to actually spend time with. And I don't know about you. I don't know about whether you're listening to this or if you're someone that's like die hard into the athletics world, but like I want to be around for my 1 year old, and like those are moments like, we have a 6 month old right now. Those moments with her where like I get to step aside and like just see her have already been some of the best moments of my life. And the perspective that both as athletes and as coaches, we are supposed to sacrifice so much of our time to devote it to being competitively excellent. And being competitively excellent, like, it shaped me into who I am. I know that if I had the perspective I had right now when I was coaching, like, I probably would be a little bit less competitively driven because I actually want people to be present in their lives and like see those things more. But all of the pressure that you see put onto athletes every single day, makes you think, yes, you should sacrifice these moments. Much deeper than I think I've gone in any other podcast if you've ever listened to me before. But it's something that comes up regularly when I talk to people that like just learn about us or like, well, what brought you here? And that's why I feel kind of pulled to share all of this. So the first thing I want to dive into is just the athletic bubble as a whole, because it starts incredibly early. The athletic bubble doesn't start when you get your first coaching job. It starts like way earlier than that. It starts before you're even a college athlete. It starts before you're a high school athlete. It starts with what you see on TV. Only do people realize like when they actually finish, they recognize that's not everything at some point. But up to that point, it's glamorized. So I would do morning practices, I would do afternoon practices, and then I would go to club practice afterwards. So I would compete for or train for 6 hours a day, which was, I mean, I learned a lot from that experience, but it wasn't necessarily a good idea. And I'm super thankful for my parents to like have the both ability to afford for me to do all those things, but also to have the patience to be like, okay, he's not going to be around. He's got to do these things. I got to drive him here and all of that. But let's just focus on, because we can spend forever talking about like the path to being a college athlete, but we'll start there because everyone's path before that can be incredibly different. So on paper, the rule is you train 20 hours a week. That's what the NCAA says. But anyone who's actually lived it knows that's by no means, by no standard, actually the real limit. Because it's not just practice, it's the 30 minutes before and after, it's the extra lifts, it's the extra mobility work, it's the stretching, it's the treatment with the trainers, it's film, it's meetings, it's travel, it's meetings with coaches. It's the mental load of like everything you do has to be preparing for those training sessions. It's the expectation that like you go to class with your teammates and they expect you to hold yourself to a standard, and your coaches don't just expect you to show up. They expect you to be 100% on your A game every single session. It's the expectation that you have to do well in school. So the minimum that you devote to being an athlete or something that's around your athletic world is 30 to 40 hours a week. You're doing a full-time job the second you step on campus. And there's a reason why you see so many athletes that drop off from freshman year to sophomore year and then every year after that. And I think I believe I had like 12 to 16 people that started my freshman year with me. I think only a handful of us actually graduated in competing in our sport. And that's not that those people like couldn't make it, but it was they were brought into something where like that's a really difficult expectation to meet and something that's very difficult for someone at that young of age to meet. And so for a long time, we like accepted that as normal. There was no pay involved. There's like very little control over your time. And there's this underlying belief that if you questioned it, you didn't want it bad enough, or you weren't committed, or you weren't consistent, or you didn't have the work ethic. And that's why when people complain about NIL now, it's kind of an interesting take for me because NIL didn't suddenly make college sports professional. College sports have always been professional in terms of expectations, time, commitment, and pressure. NIL just fully acknowledged the value that was already there. And that's why, at least in my perspective, NIL is such a great thing, not because every athlete deserves a six-figure deal. That's not really like the point and purpose of it, but because athletes finally have agency. NIL doesn't mean like you're just paying athletes for playing. It pays them for their name, image, and likeness, for their value that they bring to the schools, the brands, and media that have benefited from them forever. And it cracks the illusion, at least just a little bit, that that person that is 18 years old through 22 to 25, their time matters, their name matters, their effort matters, their sacrifice matter. And when I look back now, I realize how early we are conditioned to accept that imbalance towards all of our time, like just being devoted to that. And by no means, like I was not popular in my sport. I was not one of the best in my sport. I barely like made my conference team my senior year at a Division II school. Like I would not have gotten anything for NIL. But the concept of being able to earn that should absolutely be there. And so I can dive into that, could be a whole nother episode in itself. But the purpose is to talk about that bubble that I was a part of through my time as an athlete. And then I just rolled it directly into staying in athletics. So when I graduated, I didn't even consider leaving athletics truly. Like it was always going to be some form of that same level of commitment, whether it was going to med school, whether it's going into the military, whether it was doing something that just expected that much intensity from me. And that world, that effort made sense to me because I didn't have to face all of these other things because I just stayed within that scope that I'd always been of like, okay, I'm just gonna like work hard and focus on this thing and nothing else matters. That world completely made sense. The rules were clear, the hierarchy was clear, the grind and like relentless effort was familiar. And so the process for me, like I was debating those things, but also I was like, yeah, like I kind of just like wanted to stay in this world, and as a lot of athletes do when they go into coaching. So an alumni from my school asked me if I wanted to like help coach a team in Florida, and I jumped. I was like, of course, this is the best opportunity. People want to be a part of this world. So as I got hired, went down there, went through a season, I was working basically 70 hours a week. And I'll break down my specifics here in a second. Started as an assistant coach, 22 years old, no experience. And all of a sudden, I'm writing programs, I'm coaching, I'm giving life advice, I'm mentoring. Assistant coach making $26,000 a year. And as you say the number of the whole, you're like, okay, like obviously it wasn't making that much money. But when you break it down by the time commitment that I actually put in, which was I was on campus from pretty much 5 a.m. to at least 5 p.m. every day. Then I would coach club until 8 p.m. just to make ends meet at like $10 an hour. And I would work 5 to 10 hours every day, every weekend. So I worked roughly 70 to 80 hours a week. So when you do the math, that came out to about $7 an hour, less than minimum wage. But I didn't think like that was crazy. I thought I was paying my dues. I thought I was putting in my time to actually be able to like make it in this world, and that's what you have to do to be able to survive. And I wish I could say like that's, yes, it's super prevalent in sports like swimming and Olympic sports, but also it's present in bigger sports too. Like there are GA positions, there are unpaid coaching positions, there's volunteer positions. Now I think the volunteer thing may be potentially going away. I don't want to speak around that exactly, but that's that was how I spent my first year. Just everything. The only thing that mattered was coaching. It was also easy to do that because after you paid my rent, or I paid my rent, I paid my bills, I bought like bare minimum groceries. I had no money to spend on anything else. After student loans, I was broke. Like my parents paid for meals for me. They would send me like Omaha steaks, like frozen dinners, because they knew I didn't want to just like have meals paid for. Like I felt like I should earn it. I was doing private lessons, like I was coaching, I was doing club, but I still couldn't even like barely make ends meet. So they were sending me stuff like help, provide that. They would come down and buy groceries. Like I was still a college student. Then in 2014, the head coach leaves. There was about 4 months from when she left, and I was like, I want this job. I want this job again. I'm a go getter. Like I'm trying for it. So I took 4 months basically doing that job, doing the assistant coach job, running the pool, trying to actually like earn the head coaching position. Because I'm like, once I get that, like I'll make it. I made it. I made it. I made it. Well, I gave it everything I had. I laid out a clear plan. I had a process. And at 23 years old, I was promoted to be a head coach. Now, I'm thankful for the experience. Like the athletic director at the time, who was in his 70s, like took a risk on me and also had faith in me that he could mentor me into it. But also the perspective of it where I probably would have been better off had someone else taken that role. But the thing is, it's not like I was suddenly making $100,000 a year. I made $40,000 a year. And at the time, I remember calling my dad and being like, I'm getting $40,000 a year. Like, I'm going to have all this money. I'm going to like be able to actually pay to live, like grocery, blah, blah, blah. And like on paper, it looked like a huge step. In reality, my workload exploded. I worked from 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. every single weekday. Like I was always on. I wasn't just coaching, I was managing the pool, maintenance issues, admin, like mentoring people, being responsible for their grades, responsible for where they showed up to class, whether responsible they were like doing all this stuff. And I was supposed to have this like clear guidance, yet I'm just drinking from a fire hose all the time. And then Saturdays, I would be at the pool at 6 a.m. for 7 a.m. practice. And I would stay there and I would work until like 4 p.m. every day. And I would go home and I would plan for the next week because it wasn't like I had this massive like experiences to fall back on where I could like write a workout in an hour. Like it took me time. And then Sundays, I would work like 10 to 4. So I'd work around 95 hours a week. And when you actually break that down, I was making roughly $8 an hour. So I wasn't just coaching a team. I was running a small business without like the pay, the resources, without the support. And at that level, a Division II level, you do everything. And I was expected to have all of the answers, which like I didn't have any answers. Like I was just kind of like flying by the seat of my pants trying to figure it out. I still wanted to do the best I could for the athletes that I worked with. I still want to do the best I could for the administration and show that I could make it and be in athletics and have it be a part of who I am. But at the end of the day, I was young, I was underpaid, I was exhausted, I was overstressed, and I also had all of this responsibility towards athletes' development, their mental health, their performance, their future. And anytime any slight thing fell through the cracks, it was like boom, pressure, like expectation, this has to be the only thing that I do and this has to be my entire world. And that started to feel normal for me because inside that bubble, like that's what the actual commitment looked like. And this can come across as complaining or that I'm not happy with that experience. And I'm grateful for it because it shaped me into who I am now and kind of gave me a much bigger time horizon of experience, just like jammed into a shorter period. And, I think I learned a lot from it. And the point of sharing all this stuff is not so much for me to get it out. It is nice to talk about it, but it is more about sharing with the other person that doesn't necessarily like maybe they're still in that world, or maybe they lived in athletics, or maybe they, were the athlete that went through and never understood why their coach was just like stressed and frustrated and all the time. But that's the point of this. There's this bubble around the world where you are expected to just have this be everything to you. And for me, it was everything. And it broke at one point. We're diving further into that. So we'll flash forward a few years. We had some success at Florida Tech. We won a relay national championship, had a ton of All Americans, broke, I think, every school record pretty much, maybe except for like one. Really like rewrote like what was success there. And but along the way, there are like a million mistakes that I made. Anyways, that's not the point. Flash forward 2018, I become a Division I assistant coach at University of Pittsburgh, making $50,000 a year. The prestige, like the expectation went way up. The pressure skyrocketed. I was on campus again every day from 5 a.m. to 5:15. And when you left the office, and like this is by no means anything I say in this section is like literally just the expectation in athletics. This has nothing to do with our head coach. This has nothing to do with like the administration as a whole. This is meant to talk about the expectation in athletics in that bubble. I just want to preface with that. But I was expected to be there the entire day. Like you're expected to spend the evening on 2 to 3 hours of recruiting calls. And you were expected that some weekends were completely consumed by recruiting. Even off weekends, I would work 6 to 8 hours a day just recruiting and planning out the week and making sure that we had everything we needed for the season and doing, compliance stuff and all that stuff. So there's like still 75 to 80 hours a week that I'm working. So at this point, my hourly rate is like $12 to $13 an hour. But here's what really changed. I thought everything was performance based when I was at the Division II level. The Division I level, it was about wins, it was times, results, rankings. Like, how are you doing in all of these areas? And that was everything. Like, it was like, if you're not winning, like, you're not doing your job. And someone that, like, people that understand, like, the impact we have, you realize, like, you can only do so much coaching to where it's at some point, it's just like the athletes do their thing. And this is the main reason you see amazing teams that aren't successful or teams that, are maybe not as talented, like Indiana, that end up just absolutely dominating. Like there's a million factors involved. And sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're not. But the expectation was like win or you're done, essentially. And like all of that mattered more than context of resources, more in context of support, more in context of like, is this something that's sustainable for the coaches? And if you look, coaches churn out, especially in sports like swimming, like they churn out all the time. And the most important thing that matters more than this is it can be said that like student athlete life is the most important thing, but the reality is like it's about winning. And this is one of the reasons why one NIL is so important because it actually puts priority back on the athlete. But as far as like them actually being someone that's like truly important in this process, but also the fact that because it's only about winning, like everything is geared towards making sure you're winning, which means that the priority of the athlete actually their health, their ability to understand how like all of these things will fit into their life when they graduate, their ability to have the skills to do this and like maintain that health after they finish their career. doesn't matter. Like you can say you have all the life skills programs in the world, like this, it's not a priority. There's a reason why like what we do makes such a big impact because there's this problem there and it hasn't been fully addressed. It's not something that, I think is easy to address because there is going to be that world where, especially with NIL now, where performance truly does matter. But the whole point is to help understand that there is this bubble around athletics, and that bubble makes you think nothing else matters. And the purpose, and again, that I want to get across from this is if you find yourself in that bubble, to remember other things matter as well, both when you're an athlete, like you should be asking your strength coach, like, how would I do this? Like, if I was just trying to stay healthy, or talking to your dietitian about those things, or talking to their head coach about like, what is life actually like after you finish? Because you can talk about resumes, you can talk about life skills of being like perfect all the time. You can talk about, the perspective, like you have one practice off in a week and you're a failure, like all of those things that pop up cause serious problems later on. If we can spend more time talking or being aware of those things, then everyone's set up better for the future. And if you're one of those coaches that's going through what I went through and what I believe that experience can be built like, and some people do it better, some people do it worse. Like there's levels to all this. I'm talking about what I know and my continuum, what I saw from the people that turned out of the sport and that were my colleagues and peers at the time. Like if you are going through that experience, remember like your life matters too. What's important to you matters too. Your financial health matters too. How you feel, the energy you have, or the fulfillment you have in life outside of just working with athletes is incredibly important. And if you think that like you're in that career and you're not necessarily happy, you're not, unless you're an assistant coach in football making $2 million a year, like you probably can go get a job that pays just as well, if not better. You might have to apply to 200 jobs to make it happen, but it can absolutely happen. And so like, don't feel like you have to just stay in the world. Where I pivoted at 32, and it's the best decision I ever made. Like you can still pivot. It doesn't matter when it is. Like you can still pivot if you apply those skills somewhere else and you actually put in the effort to find something. But most people think like, well, I'm stuck in this career. You're not unless you actually take the time and like try to find something that's going to work for you. So I stay as an associate coach or I get promoted to associate coach in 2019 through 2022, made $64,500 a year. Same schedule, more responsibility, more pressure, and expected to produce like incredible results while still like advocating for some basic support. Like I remember us trying to get 2 uniforms and for uniforms to us, it was swimsuits. Like it was a fight. Like, hey, we need 3, we need 2. Like really, they need like 7 because they'll wear a wet swimsuit as they're rotating through 2 workouts a day for 5 days a week and 1 workout on Saturdays. And times we're traveling, or for them to get the same level, like for us to get shoes, 2 pairs of shoes where basketball may get 8. I'm throwing numbers out there, but the level of support across sports is not the same. And obviously, I get some are revenue generating, some are not. But the athlete sees, hey, like the coaches aren't caring for us as much as they do. Like, why does football get this and we get this? And so that disparity that there's like it is a problem, but it's also one of those things where like we're still expected to perform at that level and create that success without that level of support. And again, we circle back to the Seattle Seahawks head coach, but we're talking about that the pinnacle of the sport, and he gets 30 minutes a week with his son, who's 1 years old. Like that's the pinnacle. I don't think that's the pinnacle. I think actually having a fulfilling life and spending time with your family, like that's the pinnacle. And I think there's space for competitive excellence and to be able to like be present with your family and have that balance there. All that COVID hits and suddenly everything is revolved around the team. Everything around the entire world was revolved around COVID. But inside that world, we were being tested constantly. We had protocols we had to follow, we had compliance we had to follow. We had social restrictions that us as coaches, as employees, things we could and couldn't do in our spare time. Like our entire life had to orbit around the program, including running practices for small groups all day, every day. Like there was no conversation at one point in like everyone, I think everyone in the athletics world can probably speak to this, but like it was about, okay, how do we support the athlete? How do we support the athlete? And no one forgot that like we worked nonstop. And at that point, like I'm making, if you really break it down, $15.50 an hour. And I realized something that's important, that no title was going to change the system because non-revenue sports don't just like get more resources. They will get more expectations as things increase. But this is where I had the moment of like, okay, regardless of whether I'm successful or not, this is what my life will look like for as long as I stay in this career. And so when they changed the leadership within the program, I knew immediately like this was no world for me to stay being a part of. And I could have gone and gotten another job, moved to another city, and told my wife, who I'd been married to about 2 years at the time, like, yeah, we're going to move cities every 2 years. And I'm not going to be present when we have kids. I'm not going to be around. I'm not going to be a good father, or I'm not going to be able to be around for my kids. Like, that's not something I want. And I was incredibly frustrated with having alumni after alumni after alumni come back and be like, I don't know how to work out anymore. Like, I don't have time to train anymore. Like, don't have 10 hours a week. And like, why are we not solving this problem? And that was a tough thing to hear for me, because one of the most important parts of coaching for me was being a good mentor and someone that people feel like actually help them grow. And then they're graduating and they're struggling with their health. They're struggling to understand what the world looks like without being in athletics. They're struggling without that sense of like performance and drive all the time. I wasn't actually serving the purpose I wanted to serve. And on top of not serving the purpose I wanted to serve, actually make an impact, I was not living the life I wanted. And balance is a tough thing, because obviously, there's times you're gonna have to actually like put things aside to get results, but there was no shot of balance. Like, it was either I was going to be a coach or I was going to be present with my family based on the expectation that was laid in front of me. And even trying to meet that expectation, we still didn't do good enough. And if I wanted to be a human outside of that world, I had to get outside of athletics. Now, flash forward to life outside the bubble. First 6 months, crazy. Transparently, I pulled out all of my retirement. I maxed out my credit cards. We bought a house. I started the business. I had a side business of handyman work that we did on the side to make ends meet. I put everything on a credit card to like just be able to get outside that world. No savings to fall back on while building this business, not understanding anything about how to actually build the business. No one trusted me. No one had any credibility because we had never done this before. And for a little while, like, my self worth and my value and who I felt like I was as a person was like, I did all of this, but like, I'm actually crap. And not only that, people in the space, like people still in college athletics, were like, "Oh, yeah, he just didn't make it." Or like, "Oh, he'll be back." And like people text me like, "Oh, like, you looking for a job yet?" Like thinking that like, I just want to be back in this glamorous world. But the reality was like, despite all of that, doing that crap, like, you know, doing junk removals and putting wallpapers up and all of the stuff that we did, I was still happier. Like, I was still happier because I was actually able to spend time with my family. I was able to spend time with my wife. Like, I spent 2 years not being close with my wife because I wasn't around, and I was actually able to be a good husband. And now I'm a dad, like the best thing in the world. And I actually get to be present. And now I get to talk about this stuff openly and feel comfortable with it, about how big of a problem it can be for ex college athletes to transition outside of this world. And I think a lot of former college athletes struggle not because they're failing at life, but because they were raised inside a system where identity and output were inseparable. They're one and the same. Leaving athletics didn't feel like I was just changing careers. It feels like I was losing a language I've spoken my entire life. It literally was everything to me. And the real world doesn't grade you on effort the same way. So if you're an athlete or coach or someone who's still inside that bubble, my hope is that this gives you permission to step back and actually do the math, not just financially, but emotionally, because passion is powerful, but passion without boundaries is expensive. And too many people are still paying that cost quietly by staying in a world or living in a way that they were taught to live their entire life versus actually looking back and saying, is this fulfilling for me? Is this actually satisfying my basic needs? Am I financially stable? Is this something I see myself doing for the rest of my life? Am I going to be present with my kids? Am I actually going to be able to make an impact on others? And am I going to look back at any point and be frustrated with the fact that I stayed in this career or the fact that I always viewed myself this way because I was an athlete? So I hope this helps at least one person be able to recognize, kind of what that experience looks like. The most important thing is for people to understand that regardless of where you are at right now, you can choose to make change and actually find a path that's actually better for you. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please send me a message on Instagram, comment on a post about it, share it with someone, but let me know it actually made an impact. And I will see you guys on future episodes.